Hey, what's up, guys? This crazy crypto market is at it again. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm reading the comments and I have to chuckle myself because no sooner did I post my last video, I start reading reports of potential Binance hack. And I'm thinking, this could spook the markets. Sold half, then my stop got hit, and then wham, it was over. And guys, that just goes to show you the importance of using stops in this market, especially if you're actively trading, because stuff happens. Just it's insane. It was crazy how fast the selling started. And you know what's interesting is the Binance reports came out a few hours before the selling really started. Started seeing it going across, and I was kind of surprised that it hadn't sold off as much as it did. I saw BNB tokens selling off pretty good, but then it didn't take very long. Once the selling started to accelerate, it really picked up quick. And it's too bad because the markets were really setting up nicely. The big picture was looking good. But now, even though it's news driven, even though it's FUD, all of that, the tone has changed, and you've got to factor that in. And that's how these markets, they go until there's going to be some sort of official word from Binance, maybe saying, hey, this is unrelated to us, unrelated to the platform. It was, they figure out what caused it. I mean, who knows? So if you did not hear the news, the rumors, the reports, whatever you want to call it, with Binance, the summary of it is that there were several accounts, quote unquote, hacked. No details yet as to how. Even 2FA protected accounts were hacked, but they sold off the alts in those accounts and they pumped up via. It looks like was one of those that pumped 1,000%. And so somebody was selling alts and using that to buy another coin. And a lot of people had their coins bought at the very top of that pump, and then it dropped. So the folks impacted basically saw their Binance accounts drop significantly. And so that was the gist of it. There's not a whole lot of details beyond that just yet. I have a small group that I maintain here, a private Slack group, and for the most part, everybody in my group is saying that their balances are still there. They weren't impacted, but it's not good, folks. There's a lot of, and I'll talk about decentralized exchanges here, but there's still a lot of work to be done in the crypto space in terms of maturity, in terms of the platforms. But the biggest fears and the biggest thing that would hurt this market is basically a Mount Gox scenario, because we've already felt that, right? So even if just one exchange was hacked significantly or went down, that would cause a lot of panic in all markets. And we're seeing a small example of that, right? There's rumors of potentially Binance, which is a significant exchange, has a lot of influence in the space. But even just rumors of a few accounts being hacked for this, I mean, this selling was across the board. It didn't matter what exchange you were on. The selling was seen everywhere. And so it just goes to show you that there's still that broader concern of anytime we hear major accounts, major exchanges getting hacked, there's the Mount Gox concerns arise again. And so I know there's a lot of newer folks. Most of you guys probably have heard of Mount Gox or are familiar with the stories, but if you're not, go check that out. At the time, it was basically the exchange. They did like 90% plus of all transactions. Bitcoin was a lot smaller back then, a lot tinier for sure. And it was very concentrated, and there was a lot of manipulation happening on that exchange. And when it ended and the exchange went under and it got hacked, it put a big hurt on the Bitcoin ecosystem for a little while. But certainly the markets have matured since then, and we would survive another exchange having a similar effect, but it would still cause huge sell-off, huge pain, especially on an exchange that has such volume all around. Let's go to coin market cap here real quick. Looking at the coin market cap. Come on. So if you go to trading volume by exchange rankings, when this pulls up, and we'll go take a look at the charts here in a minute, but you can see the rankings, right? Binance, BTC trades huge volume here, right? 463 million over the last day there. Bitfinex 640, but you know, the exchanges are certainly up there in terms of all around volume right here. Total trading volume 24-hour 1.8 billion, 1.6 billion, a billion. So any of these exchanges up here in the top 5, top 10 would have a significant impact on the market if one of these went down, right? And so last year, when Poloniex was still one of the leading volume exchanges, they were having a lot of issues, and every time there was a Poloniex report, or they froze withdrawals and stuff like that, you saw the same effect. The market would sell off, people would rush to exit Poloniex, withdrawals were taking forever, and so you can see that their volume has really come off here recently. But they used to be at the top of the list, and we used to see similar things happen. When Poloniex would have issues, the markets would have a little bit of a scare and there'd be some selling. So that's what we're seeing. At this point, it's very much panic selling, right? It's truly the uncertainty, we don't know what's happening, the price has fallen, and the selling just kind of feeds on itself, right? The stops get taken out, that causes more selling, and so forth. And so that's basically what we saw. And so let's take a quick look at the charts all around. We're seeing a pretty decent bounce here, but it's way oversold. Look at that volume on all exchanges. The volume is just massive. You can see it was just a pure panic sell, a pure just dump, no questions asked, and then we'll figure it out later. And sometimes that's the right thing to do, right? But especially if you're trading, if you're long-term hold, there's no way you can respond that fast, especially if your coins are off exchange and so forth. But this is what we were looking at earlier today. So I posted a video, and no sooner did I post that video, I mean, it was literally 20 minutes maybe, the market started to panic and sell off, and it was gone from there. So what I was talking about in my video initially was this potential cup and handle pattern that I was watching to be formed. And during my video, we had seen a pretty good support come in around 10.4. Obviously, that has been decimated. That is no longer support. And we saw that quick sell-off happen overall, just basically in a couple of hours. And most of that happened relatively quickly. I was watching these charts as they happen. You can see this is a 30-minute chart. You can see this 1 30-minute bar. I mean, just once it broke that 10.4, 10.3 support, I mean, it was just very quick to the downside. And then it culminated in a low just here recently around 9,400 here on Bittrex. How low did that go on some of these others? I know it's bouncing right now, but right now it just feels like a bounce from oversold conditions. We hit 9,400 on basically everything. And so very quick, very steep sell-off, and just massive volume. You can see it was just across the board dumping of everything. BNB coin was taking a smack. Obviously, I mean, it was the exchange that got hit. Let me go to some of these other charts here, and it's bouncing now, right? So someone's picking it up here at the lows around $8 on the USD pair, BNB versus BTC. Just very volatile now with the news coming out. So it's just crazy action. So let's go look at BTC. Does this break the charts? Does it ruin the pattern that we were watching here, the cup and handle and all that stuff? So in my last video, I mentioned we didn't want to see a break below that 10.3, 10.2 area, because then the handle would get very deep and it would just break that pattern. And that's really what we've seen happen here, especially if this 4-hour bar closes down here, which it looks like it probably will. I don't see this turning into a massive wick that just goes all the way back up to 10.5. If it did, with the volume we saw, that would be super bullish, but that's not really what I'm expecting here. And so what you got to look at now is the alternative. Now, potentially, we've seen a massive double top put in place here on this chart, with the second top being slightly lower than the first. That would be in line with the textbook double top. And the neckline on that pattern is going to be this 9394 area, give or take, right there. We basically went to that here earlier today, just above it. We're bouncing from that. But if this continues and we see more red bars to the downside on this 4-hour chart, and I don't expect that neckline to hold if this selling continues at this level. We're definitely oversold, so it would not be surprising to see a little bit of a bounce here, but you got to be patient now. I think the momentum has shifted, the sentiment has really shifted here. Unfortunately, it was actually setting up pretty nicely here on this bounce. We were looking at this. Some of the alts were starting to find a low versus BTC. That's pretty much been smacked, unfortunately. I was watching Cardano. You can see Cardano was trying to put in a little bit of a low here. Some of these other names, Ethereum has been underperforming BTC for quite some time. Let me clear this. I'll talk about that pattern here in a sec. And was looking for a potential low there. And, you know, it's starting to bounce a little bit versus BTC. Some big volumes coming in here. But that's the BTC equivalent. And if Bitcoin continues lower, then these charts are going to continue to get hit. I mean, look at Ethereum right here. It went as low as $725. There's some bargain hunters out there, that's for sure. I know some of you guys were picking that up there at the lows. Looking at some of these other names, Litecoin. Litecoin went all the way down to 170s. Neo sub 100. Neo went as low as $88 on that smackdown. And so we are seeing just the USD pair pricing is just getting hit very hard on all of these names. Omise Go hit 1350. And so just some of these bigger names, Ripple has already been kind of weak, but Ripple 78 cents at the low, 79 cents. And so that's been a big hit overall in the market because of this. So there is, you know, if this was just a quick panic sell, panic dump, I mean, for those of you that are brave enough to do the bargain shopping, this may turn out to be one of those moments where you buy that the big shakeout. But I'm going to remain cautious here, only because even though it is news driven and it is event driven and FUD and all that, just it's better to just hold out a little bit, be patient, and let's see how this plays out, because we don't know what the official news is yet, right? We've not seen any other follow-up reports to that. So it's better to just kind of sit tight, in my opinion. I mean, if you're doing some quick trading, that's something else, right? There's certainly, I think, opportunity for some bounce plays and some quick in and out trades. But the bigger picture, I think being patient, seeing how this plays out, will be better off overall. Now, on the bigger picture, zooming out, right? So we had the big sell-off in February, took us all the way down to the 6K mark. We've since seen a rally. There was this potential inverted head and shoulders that we were all looking at. I believe that's still in play, even with this sell-off here. So let me show you guys that pattern. And so the left shoulder, you can say, is this 92, 9300 area. This creates the head down at the lows. We've got the neckline in and around here. And then this was potentially the second shoulder. Now we're seeing this other dip here, right? So that's, you know, the broader pattern is still there if this 92, 93 area holds. But there is no doubt there's a lot of technical damage being done to the charts right now. The volume selling is not bullish at all. I mean, you saw that the bounce was relatively light volume. That was the rising wedge I was looking at. And the sell on the break has been very high volume. And we have to wait to see if we get some sort of capitulation now on the downside and a strong volume reversal to correspond. Right now, the bounce is basically a bounce, in my opinion. That's all we're seeing at this point, is just a bounce. And we got to just give it a little bit more time until things settle out. So going back to the daily chart, there's been this broader uptrend that has been established, and I was watching this trend line and I didn't want to see this break, and unfortunately we're seeing that break take place? Could it still recover? If we saw a big wick on the daily chart in a recovery, it would negate some of this. But right now, this broader uptrend has been broken. And if it closes below here today, and we've got about 6 hours left on this daily candle, which is a lot of time in crypto land. But if it closes below this line, which I expect it probably will, then that's going to really start to shift the momentum. This higher low is going to be really tested here and potentially may not hold. So then we're going to have to look for another place of support. And so on the downside, if we break that 9,300 area, the 9,000, 8,900 area was a major support resistance point that we broke out of here on this second rally. And so that's the area somewhere in between there. If we made a higher low, would still, the daily picture would still be okay, but it's not as strong. That's for sure. I mean, this is really shifting things because we were seeing that pullback and it was just looking very positive and it was kind of pulling back to the levels that we expected. We needed a little bit of a pullback, but this is just deep. Granted, it's news driven. It's some of that stuff, but now we just got to wait. Where is the low? And so 9,000 is the next kind of big psychological number, also an area of support. And so that's going to be a key level to hold. If we break that, and also that'll confirm this double top, that would be very negative for the markets if we did a measured move on the double top. Basically, go from the top of the rise down to the neckline, and you project that out from the breakout point. And if it breaks out below that double top, then that's projecting down to 7K. And that would be this, basically this low here. We had that wick that took us to 6 overnight, but that would be 7K if this double top plays out. So those are the levels we got to watch over the next day or so. Unfortunately, that news is not positive for the markets, so the rumors, however we want to call it. But that's the BTC chart here. I'll go into some of the other charts here in a minute here. But decentralized exchanges, there's a lot of talk about, hey, this is another reason why we need decentralized exchanges. This article has a list of some exchanges. I know it's not all of them, and there's still some being developed. Even Binance was talking about creating a decentralized exchange. So what other ones do you guys use if you do? And there's pros and cons, I mean, the trading, if you're trading, right, the centralized exchanges, at least for now, tend to be a lot more robust, right? They're just quicker in terms of being able to execute on the buys and the sells, which if you're trading, that's very important. But there's a need for some of this, especially if you're not necessarily doing a lot of trading, but just kind of maybe a little bit more active than parking money or parking coins on a hardware wallet. And so that's where some of these will come in handy because you're not necessarily relying on an exchange to safeguard the tokens, right? And that's the biggest risk with all of these very large exchanges is, and they certainly have gotten a lot better about security and protecting themselves, but there's still the risk. I mean, as long as they're centralized, they are a target that that is, hacks and trying to steal the coins and a lot of things. And just, I mean, like we saw today, even it wasn't necessarily a hack in the sense that someone went in and took a bunch of coins out of the exchange, as far as we know. But this was interesting because it was using people's accounts to sell all the alts and then buy up another one. And it was just like, it feels like a rogue hacker just wanted to cause some havoc there, right? That's so it's a little bit different than what we've seen, where most of the time what you see is an exchange gets hacked and someone steals the BTC or some of the other coins out of the exchange. We saw that recently with NEM, in Japan, where they got hacked. And so it tends to happen, unfortunately. And so some of these exchanges, anybody use anything else? There's a bunch of them listed on here. I have not personally used any of these DEX very much. I mean, I've looked through those sites and all that, but I mean, as far as trading goes, for the most part, I stick to some of the bigger names, right? Binance, Bittrex, GDEX. And so I'll use some of those for more active trading. So I'm not familiar with these. I have not used them. So I'm just kind of wanting to get your guys's take. Yeah, the Keeper network is supposed to be coming out. That's another one that's not on here. So there's certainly a demand for the DEX, but it's got to be robust. I mean, if it's just clunky and too slow, or if the volume is just not there, then kind of, that's the biggest challenge with a lot of these right now. So any of you guys use bots? I mean, this whole talk about the bots being potentially the reason, the API access. I don't use bots for trading. I think using technology, like for market scans and alerts, when we're working on something like that, that helps a lot. But I'm not to the point where I trust a bot to actually execute any specific buys or sells for me. And I know a lot of you guys don't trade. I know a lot of you guys are just more, investors and hodlers longer term into the markets. So let's go take a look at a few more charts here. Let's go through some of these real quick. So BTC, $9,800. We've had the quick sell-off sub 10K levels as the panic selling ensued following the uncertainty around a potential Binance hack. And I say potential because there's really not a lot of details yet as to what happened. Obviously, it sounds like it was a hack. Somehow somebody was able to access certain accounts. But was it truly a hack of Binance, or was it a backdoor through some of these APIs or something else, right? That's kind of the question that remains. And so let's go through some of the other big names. So Bitcoin Cash, let's take a look at Bitcoin Cash. How is that looking out here? So that one's kind of been in a broader downtrend for quite some time here. Let me clear my notes. I was looking at some shorter term trades here. So Bitcoin Cash, the breakout point that I was looking at a couple of days ago, it was getting real tight just below that 1300. I had some conditional buy orders for a day or two above that, but once it started to break down, just closed those out. But that was kind of the level I was looking at. We've since broken down from that. This chart certainly is not looking pretty. It's just kind of been in this downtrend, a little bit of a bounce, and now the volume is really starting to come in on the downside. Versus BTC, it's been in this longer term downtrend. You can see I've got it highlighted here. Bitcoin Cash has just kind of been in this overall, especially here recently, this overall parallel channel. And you can say that's actually a lot wider there. You can kind of point out that way. But until that trend changes, it's certainly not outperforming Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Cash, let's look at Ethereum. We'll go through some of the big names here. FBTC, there was a couple of things I was looking at here and still in play, and it's still trying here. So versus BTC, you're seeing a potential bigger double bottom pattern forming on this daily. It's still below the 10 EMA, so it really needs to get above that. That's kind of the first key to really start turning the trend here. Sorry about that. And RSI, slight bullish divergence on the RSI, but not a ton. But you're seeing some volume coming in here versus BTC. If you look at the 4-hour chart, I was looking at a potential inverted head and shoulder on the 4-hour chart, and you can see the RSI is really confirming that. Look at that volume here off of the low versus BTC. So you're seeing a little bit of a shift into Ethereum from Bitcoin here near the lows. And so perhaps Ethereum is finally going to see a little bit of a counter trend rally versus BTC. It's just been, just really underperforming Bitcoin. Most alts have, but it's just really been underperforming Bitcoin, and especially being a big name. And Ethereum is one of those names where it tends to be a little bit of a bellwether in terms of the alts. And so when Ethereum is much stronger than BTC, I've noticed the alts tend to also be stronger across the board and have that little bit of a rally. And when Ethereum's selling off, generally speaking, the alts tend to sell off. And so it's a little bit of an altcoin bellwether when you look at the BTC comparative. But look at that volume just coming in on Coinbase. I mean, that's massive. If you look at some of the other exchanges, let's see how high that looks. Yeah, it's pretty strong volume on some of these other exchanges. So some BTC is certainly moving into Ethereum here into the lows. And so maybe we finally see that low on FBTC. If you look at the longer term chart, I mean, it's kind of in no man's land here. We had this big run up here versus BTC, and right now where the price is at, it's right here, and there's really not a lot of strong support, right? So it's kind of a no man's land in terms of a technical analysis point of view. Let me do a fib on this, see how that looks. I mean, it's sub 382 level above the 618. So yeah, I mean, at this point, you're just kind of looking at the price volume action. Potential double bottom here is what I'm looking at. And that volume is really starting to confirm on the short-term timeframes. And so maybe we finally see a little bit of a turnaround on ETH versus BTC. Sorry about that. So that's ETH. Let's go take a look at Ethereum Classic. That was a name that was popular here, kind of with the airdrop, mostly drove that. And I'm not a longer term holder at this point of Ethereum Classic. Certainly traded a little bit here during this run up we had, but you can see it created a pretty big double top. And we saw a pretty good sell off after that. And, those airdrops and those forks like we saw in Z Classic, they tend to not be sustainable in terms of the market, right? You may see an initial run up prior to the event on some of these names, and they're tradable rallies, in my opinion, but you very often get this effect where even before the fork or before the airdrop, I mean, they'll start to sell them off. You'll see profit taken. And a lot of times it's because whatever coin you could potentially benefit from holding, Ethereum Classic or whatever the forked coin is, usually that doesn't outweigh the risk of the potential sell-off. So you'll see a lot of profit taken happen before the actual event. And so we saw that in Z Classic. Now, Z Classic had a pretty big oversold bounce yesterday from just crazy low levels, but you can see what happened here. And we saw that last time. This is not new news, but just as soon as the snapshot happened, it was just down like 80% like instantly. And then it just bounced, really died off. And then here in the last couple of days, just a massive rally, massive counter trend rally off the lows. I mean, this is already up 170%. And so if you are brave enough to buy the Classic here at the lows, you've probably done pretty well. But let's take a look at some of the other names here. Litecoin. So Litecoin versus BTC has also been underperforming. There's been a little bit of a double top that was put in place here a couple of weeks ago. And this is the daily chart. You can see just in the last week and a half has just really been just drifting lower. And RSI still has room to go to the downside, in my opinion. And so I'm, this kind of, it's finding some support here, but it's still risky, in my opinion. You want to see some big volume coming in off the lows. It's trying to find a little bit of support here. If you go to the 4-hour charts, some volumes coming in here versus BTC, but certainly not the level that we were seeing on Ethereum. That one, ETH is really showing a lot more BTC flowing into that name at that point, but it's trying here for sure. You can see the RSI is definitely heading a little bit north as the price drifted lower. So a little bit of a divergence there. The MACD, same thing, signal lines above, but just the price action, which is the most important thing, it's not as strong yet. If it starts to break out and you see a lot more volume coming in, that'll be a good sign that maybe LTC versus BTC has found a little bit of a low in the near term. And a lot of these alts, I think, are getting really close to finding that low versus Bitcoin. They've just been really hammered since January, right? And so, I mean, if you look at some of these other names, let's go to EOS. That was a big runner late last year. So I've got here highlighted from the last stream. The first level of support has basically been broken. This continues to drift lower. The next major level of support here is that 548 level or so on the BTC chart. But you can see, technically speaking, it's certainly hitting those oversold levels. On the daily chart, on the 4-hour chart, you're seeing a little bit of a bullish divergence. You're seeing a lot more volume coming in here at the lows. And so maybe that's another one where it's another potential low point here or getting really close. And I think a lot of these are starting to get a lot closer to finding that low point. Cardano was one we mentioned earlier. Something similar happening there, right? You saw this big pullback over the last couple of months. And here it is trying to flatten out a little bit. Now it did up here too, and then saw a pop and then another leg down. But we're starting to see the same effect there. And it's also corresponding with the major support point, which ideally they're going to bounce. This is where you want to see them bounce. And if you look at the 4-hour chart, we got to see more volume coming in here to the upside and really show that this is reversing. But a lot of these are putting in this kind of this divergence. You see the MACD trying to go up higher and RSI kind of diverging a little bit. But They're not ready yet, but I think they're getting close. Let's go through a few more here. Dash. Let's look at Dash. That's a bigger name. So Dash versus BTC. 4-hour chart. Not pretty. Pretty much looking like a lot of these other names here, but the same story, right? The divergence potentially in the RSI. But if you look at the daily chart, this one has had quite the pullback and still no signs of a low being put in yet. The USD chart on all of these are going to look like this just because of the action we're seeing on BTC today with the big sell-off, and that's dragging down prices from a USD equivalent. Let's go through NEO. Oh, poor NEO. I don't know, man. $100 NEO kind of, it's tempting. $100 NEO is tempting, I gotta admit. So let's look at the USD pair first. Here we go. So NEO dollar saw a big shakeout today, took it down to around $88. We're seeing a little bit of a bounce. There was some additional news that drove this selling with the potential nodes and the consensus nodes and the mechanism. The blockchain stopped for a bit, and there was just some fear around, hey, how robust is the blockchain really? Do we have things to worry about? And it was just kind of a lot of FUD, but that certainly impacted the price. And then, of course, today, a little bit more, and unfortunately, the markets will react to that kind of news, and things move fast here, but kind of in no man's land here, in my opinion, in terms of the chart. We just kind of got to wait this one out, see if we get a little bit of a turnaround on the BTC chart. It's also kind of just sitting here. There's not a lot of ton of support until you get down to these levels, and certainly this little base back in here, but we're a long ways from that. So that's what I'd be watching. I'm just kind of just sitting tight on this one. On the upside, it broke from a pretty decent support level right around here. The 10 EMAs there now. So that's going to be the first big test. I expect bounces into that point. We'll see some resistance. And until it gets back above that, you got to get cautious on this one versus BTC. All right, let's see here. A couple other ones. Let's go back to BTC. So if you're just joining, and I've seen some comments around, hey, this is what's causing this, or why is it selling off? The initial sell-off started when more news, more rumors started coming out, reports of people's accounts on Binance being potentially hacked. Alts were sold off. They were used to buy another alt. And that really started to accelerate the selling once we started hearing more reports of that. And that's basically what caused the dump. And then it just tends to feed on itself. And you see the stops taken out. You see more selling, more panic selling. And this is just crazy volume. It's just a major sell-off. And so if you're trading or if you're active in these markets, guys, this is a perfect example of why it's important to put in stops. I mean, I know sometimes it's annoying and you get stopped out and then they go higher. But if you're active, you avoid the majority of these type of moves when you have a stop in place, just because there's some point in time in the price where it's just you step aside, and I just get out of the way and I'll wait for another entry point. And so that's what I did. And so I pretty much got stopped out as it started selling off. I manually sold into part of that before my stops got hit, just because I saw the news and I thought, hey, this could really spook the markets. I didn't think we'd see this level of spook the markets. But I saw the news on Binance and I thought, well, Binance certainly has a lot of influence on this market. And if people are scared of potential hacks, they're going to sell it anyway, even before the news comes out. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, is just across the board, the big dump that we saw. The big one. This is a huge, I mean, look at this 4-hour bars, the biggest 4-hour bar we've seen since the lows here. The extreme panic selling we saw back here. So I mean, that's a massive, very quick, very brutal move to the downside. And so I'm sitting it out at this point. Accounts are in cash, and just gonna wait this one out to see how it goes. Now, it's certainly a reaction. It's panicking, but hey, I'm not gonna argue with the markets. If they're selling off like this, then I'm just gonna kind of sit tight for now. look at the daily chart. Yeah, so you have a good point there, right? So the big picture daily chart um, has, I mean, the broader trend. I mean, we've seen this massive rally, and we were very close to really turning this around. A breakout above that, 12K, let's call it, right? A breakout above that would have really confirmed it to the upside, especially because there was this big inverted head and shoulders pattern that was forming. With this, there's just a lot of damage done technically, and you can argue that the trend, the downtrend that it's been in has shifted a little bit, and now it's kind of this here, right? And so that's going to be the key level to be watching now, because yeah, I mean, the broader trend is down. If you go to the weekly chart, let me go to a different exchange that's got a little bit more history, but you can see the weekly chart still needs some more upside confirmation to really look a lot stronger. Let me go to the weekly chart. And so, yeah, there's definitely cause to be cautious here. I believe from a long-term perspective, we should certainly still be cautious. You can see here the broader weekly charts, the same thing. The trend is still there. We were looking pretty good here last week. You can see we closed above this 10 EMA, and we needed to really confirm to the upside this week. And unfortunately, we were getting really close, but this is now causing a lot of damage to that chart. We'll have to see how the volume looks on this. The daily volume or the weekly volume last week was relatively light compared to the prior 2 weeks, but that's not unusual considering it was coming off the lows where volume tends to climax there at those extremes. But this all-around picture, right, the big picture weekly, this is why there's still potential room that, hey, we see some more downside because we haven't officially broken that downtrend. On the daily chart, there was a couple of lines that you could have been using, a couple of ways to look at it. And there was the more steep line, which personally I was looking at, and I thought we had done a pretty good job breaking. And that was this line here, kind of taking a little bit more steep look at that. Let me take the log off. And this is really the broader line that I was looking at, and it looked like we had done a pretty good job of breaking above that. We were pulling back, we were testing. Had we held that and really rallied off of that, that would have looked a lot more positive. But we're back below that, unfortunately. And so just got to remain cautious here for now. From a longer term perspective, this could be a big double top on the daily chart. And so that line that I have drawn there around 9,300, 9,200, that's going to be a key test, a good support area to be keeping an eye on over the last couple of days. Let's see here. New tweet from Binance. What do we got going on? I was watching their account earlier, and they were a bit quiet. Where is the latest tweet here? Three minutes ago, all funds are safe. There were irregularities in trading activity, automatic alarms triggered. Some accounts may have been compromised by phishing from before. We are still investigating. All funds are safe. Well, that's encouraging. I do have some funds on Binance, so oh, these crazy markets, they'll drive you crazy sometimes. It was looking so good too, man. It's funny that you mentioned that because on the stock question, I saw that today too, and this is the second time in recent past we've seen a broad sell-off where the stock market sees a little bit of a hit, and the crypto markets, they generally haven't been too correlated, but I've been watching that to see if there is any type of correlation on the markets, and so it's interesting to see that there was a little bit of sell-off in both markets at the same time. I also tracked the metals. You can see the metals having a little bit of a sell-off today, gold and silver. And so just across the board, commodities, stocks, cryptos, taking a little bit of a hit here. So we're seeing some, not much of a bounce here. Still 97, 9,800 bucks on the BTC side. Cardano, ADA has been looking prime. It really has. A lot of these I've been just watching really closely, looking like, man, they're potentially hitting a low. And yeah, if you're brave enough to buy at the lows, This could be a potential bargain if you're a longer term holder on some of these names. But I'd like to see a little turnaround, a little bit of upside confirmation first. Let me go through a couple other names here, and we will take a look at yours. And I did have a live stream scheduled for later today. I'm not sure if I'm going to cancel that yet or not, but with the market doing what it was doing, I thought I'm just going to go live now. This is just pretty wild action here. So this is NAM versus BTC, just continues to be in this free fall, not looking pretty. Where's the low? Where's the low on NAM? Another one that I was watching here had a little bit of a breakout, fake out. It's still trying here, but that was Monero. And so Monero on the BTC chart was looking very nice, setting up a pretty good ascending triangle on this 4-hour chart. You can see that with the breakout point being that purple line there. And we saw some big volume come in, but there was a big reversal volume, and just turbulence of the market here was hitting that pretty hard. You can see after the breakouts, it got pretty shaky, just kind of all over the place here. But that one was showing a little bit of a breakout. And this is one of the fewer charts versus BTC that is moving in this direction, right? Where it's going up, as opposed to some of these other charts that are just in this long grind down versus BTC. So Verge, let's take a look at Verge. That's another one that's seen a pretty significant pullback here versus BTC. And it looked like it was trying to put in a little bit of a low point here a couple of weeks back. You saw some decent volume coming in off the lows. But unfortunately, that's all it was. It's just like a little pop to the upside, quickly sold off, and it just continues to grind lower. And, you know, this feels so much like that period we saw in October, that, you know, September, October, November, where so many of these names had already been in fall, and then BTC started to rally, but a lot of these alts just did not keep up until November. Really, we started to see some pretty decent bottoms and turnarounds across the board. But it just has that same feel, just that the market sentiment all around feels very similar. Zcash, big sell-off USD side. Zcash, BTC still below this moving average, just trying to bounce, but so far meets resistance at that moving average. Walton popped pretty big yesterday on news and just sold it off. And so you can see there was a partnership there with an Alibaba company, and this just really sold off following that news. No upside follow through. It was looking pretty good when it initially set up. Let me look at the 30-minute here. Initially, it was doing this, right? It had the big news, kind of pause, consolidate. You like to generally see that after a big pump, go sideways for a little bit, and then they will potentially rally from there, and then just really dumped hard after that. VeChain was another one that was moving pretty good yesterday, and you can see that here. Same effect, had that big pump, and then just no upside follow through, unfortunately, in a lot of these names. And so you can see had the big rally, the big volume came in, pull back. Doesn't mean you write them off completely, but you know, you want to see if these hold the lows of recent. But unfortunately, a lot of these, this is the same. You know, that's why I'm so cautious on a lot of these when I see the big pumps, because we've seen this just so often here in the last couple of weeks. And like I said, it feels a lot like October. We were seeing the same thing in October, in September and October, where you would see these big pumps and then they just were not sustained. Pivx had a big move yesterday off the low, same type of thing, and then just not a whole lot of upside follow through. You see these long wicks to the upside. So let's go back real quick to the Twitter sphere. You still want to the giveaways are still happening, people. Please don't send any coins to any of those scammers. It's just crazy. I'm tempted to put I am giving away crypto on my Twitter handle, but then I'd get all the scammers hitting me up, so I probably don't want to do that. So, all right, let's take a look at some of these other names here. So all in on BitConnect. Oh man, that saga continues. There's subpoenas going out. There's court dates. It's always something going on here. So BTC here real quick. Anything else you guys want to look at before I wrap it up? I wanted to just come online, do a quick live stream in light of this crazy market action. I did have a live stream scheduled later today, but I'm still debating whether or not to just cancel that and then maybe just go live later this evening after we've got a little bit more time on these charts and see how it plays out. So let's look at Ethereum. So you guys are asking about Ethereum. That one versus BTC is showing some positive action here with some volume coming in at the lows. And so let's see if it can finally turn it around. But sorry, wrong coin. That's ETH Classic. So you can see here in the last, this is the 4-hour charts, right? And we've been in a long-term, just this big pullback versus BTC. I was looking at a potential double bottom here. It's starting to form that. But if you look at the 4-hour chart, especially with the volume that's showing up here, this may have found a little bit of a near-term low. And so you can see there's a pretty good support level being established there with big volume coming in right after on both of those, certainly well above average volume. And if we can really start to close above this level, that would really start to shift the momentum here on this ETH-BTC chart. Now, clearly, ETH-USD taking a pretty good smack along with everything else. It's definitely hitting some oversold levels on the RSI right now. It doesn't necessarily mean it goes straight up from here, but we could see a pretty decent bounce here as well, and that might confirm the BTC chart. So, but ETH certainly one to keep an eye on here versus Bitcoin. Let's see here. Stratis. Let's see Stratis. Are you seeing Stratis cup and handle? You must be looking at the daily, or are you talking about this big cup and handle? Because this, in my opinion, would not be a big cup and handle. Keep in mind, a cup and handle pattern is a continuation pattern following a rise, and then it's a pause, basically, that resets and sets up a new base from which it goes higher. And so when you see a cup and handle here at the lows, I mean, if you're talking about the pattern from this rise all the way down, that's just way too big. That's not really the pattern I would be looking at. But it doesn't necessarily mean we don't go higher on this. But what I'd really be watching is just a break of this trend. I mean, that would really start to shift the momentum. And until that happens, there's just not a whole lot to do. Could this be a potential falling wedge? Yeah, maybe we're seeing that play out. And that's really more the pattern I'd be watching as opposed to a big cup and handle. But there's certainly no confirmation of a low on Stratis versus BTC yet. And if we go to the 4-hour charts, we're seeing some big volume here, and a lot of these names are showing, potential reversal. If we see a big reversal, especially on volume, that's usually a good sign that, hey, maybe there's a strong low being put in. And very often they will test them, and so I wouldn't necessarily FOMO into the first bounce. You might want to look and see if there's a little bit of a retest, maybe a higher low established. And then go from there. Just got to be a lot more cautious right now because there's no doubt the market, especially the alts, are in a bear. I mean, they're just pulling in, and until you see some positive confirmation and across the board, right? There's always going to be the names. Almost every day there's a name that pumps, but you want to see kind of the across the board look on some of these. Omise Go, I just covered it briefly. We didn't look at that one, but let's take a look. This one was one I was really liking. It had a big breakout attempt and then just totally failed on the breakout, reversed. And after that, it was just big pulling, and it's been pulling in pretty sharply since then over the last couple of days now. USD pair, probably not even worth looking at, but it's kind of in no man's land here. The big support level to be watching now is this, basically the low $13 range on Omise Go versus BTC, though. Again, I'd just be waiting on this one because had a big pullback following a attempted breakout, and that's usually not a positive sign. When you have a failed breakout, they tend to go lower, and we're seeing pretty steep sell-off there. A lot of these names are hitting some oversold conditions, so we could see a bounce near term, but it could just be a bounce for now. Let's see. We looked at VeChain. We looked at EOS. Lisk. Yeah, I saw that tweet. Thanks for posting that. They expect it to be a phishing scam, and that's what it sounds like. It didn't sound like it was a Binance infrastructure problem or anything like that, or Binance got hacked. But more to come out on that. But the question is always if it comes out that, hey, this was just a phishing scam and some of the accounts were affected, are the markets going to rally, right? That's kind of the question. Or is it going to be the big turnaround? Because the level of selling we saw was just massive. And it's going to take a lot to really undo that damage, unfortunately. I'll go back to Lisk here in a second. Sorry, guys. But let me go back to BTC. I mean, it's really going to take a lot to undo that potential big double top. I mean, there's still quite a bit of time hours wise on the daily candle. So if this turns into a big wick support bar type of thing where here above, the low 10Ks or something, then maybe. But if it looks like this when the market closes, or at least the daily candle, it's just not going to look good technically. Even if Binance comes out and says that everything's fine, but I think a lot of damage was done. So Lisk, just the long downtrend continues. And you've seen these big turnaround attempts, but they don't last very long. I mean, this is the 4-hour chart, and you see it, 3 bars maybe, and then the big pullback. But I'm not seeing a whole lot. I mean, this is kind of at a key support area. You can see there was this big consolidation back here, but I'd be waiting on this one. Just not looking strong. After it broke down from this little base up here, it's just not looking very good. Icon. I'll do a few more, guys, and then I'll go ahead and wrap it up. And potentially, I'll keep that live stream scheduled for later today. That's only 3 hours from now, so maybe I'll cancel it and do one later in the evening to kind of accommodate some different time zones. But ICX, this is another one. Long term, I like this one here, but just has been in a big pullback. It's near a key support level right now. You can see it's at the low of this base here. It's undercutting it a little bit, but if it can get back above here relatively quickly, meaning the next day or so, then we could see the beginnings of a pretty good low being established. But again, like a lot of these, this is just not a strong looking chart. It's certainly not pretty versus BTC. And so you're going to want to see some good volume coming in and some, the trend really starting to change. And keep in mind, I mean, it doesn't happen in one shot, right? The way the trends changes, you might see a big volume pump and a little bit of a pullback. And if you start to make higher lows and doing that, I'd rather just wait. And if I'm buying this, I'd be okay paying a little bit more, but just knowing that the risk is a little bit lower because the trend potentially is shifting. So I just would be a little bit more patient with so many of these names that are doing this right now. ZRX, another one. Another project I like, but same thing, right? Just after that big top, we've seen the pretty decent bounces, but just the selling, the drifting, the grind lower continues. And man, how far off the top is this? This one is 65%, 64%. So a lot of these names are just down 60, 70% since a couple of months ago. Let's see, we did Cardano, we didn't do QXP, I'll do that one, but Cardano again, watch the low here, look for the volume reversal to come in. I think it's getting close, but gotta wait for confirmation here. Let's do QXP, I haven't looked at that one here. Yeah, just no volume. I mean, what's a good example is that Ethereum chart. I mean, that's a good example of it potentially trying to turn the corner here. This is just seeing a lot of selling volume still here at the lows. And so just not a lot of bullish action yet. Right. A good counterexample, let me go up to that FBTC chart, right, where you start to see this, right, when you start to see more alts starting to look like this, where you're putting in bottom formations, double bottoms, inverted head and shoulders, breaking out from falling wedges, stuff like that. And that doesn't happen in a day. It happens over the course of several days. That's what you want to start looking for, these type of signs of, hey, maybe they're finding a low. The good news is if Ethereum finds a low versus it tends to be a bellwether a little bit, and you will tend to see the alts kind of follow suit. And if ETH really starts to rally, then maybe we'll see some of the other alt names start outperforming BTC. And maybe not even outperform, right? At best, if they just start going sideways and keeping par with BTC, that'd be a first good step. But right now, they're not even doing that. They're just really lagging behind. Let's see, Monero, we covered that. Still very strong. Yep. Do I use Ichimoku? I personally do not. I don't have anything against it. I think it's good. And in fact, in my my private Slack channel, there's a couple of guys that really use it and use it well, and we have some alerts that we have based on I can't even say it, Ichimoku, and the different type of crossovers and such. But I just don't, and there's nothing wrong with it. And my philosophy on TA is find a handful of indicators you really like, and you kind of get a feel for it, because it just depends on your style too. If it's longer term, shorter term, swing trade, and then go with that. But there's certainly nothing wrong with it. I just recommend keep it simple. Don't have like 10 indicators on your chart. Keep it relatively clean, and you'll tend to do better off with a few that you're really comfortable with versus a lot, because then you just have too much data and you get just overload at that point. Yeah, inverted head and shoulders on F. That's what I see as well on the 4-hour chart. Yeah, we did Neo. We did a lot of the bigger names early on. And if I do another live stream later this evening, I'll go ahead and just cycle through all the names again. How did you educate yourself in investing? Oh, man, I can't even count how many books I've read. I've attended courses and seminars, and I've trained from others who are very good and have learned from them. And just I probably have made all of the mistakes that you can imagine. And you learn from experience a lot of times, but you also have to keep track of what's working for you and what isn't. And there's some things that I found that just were not my style or just didn't work for me in terms of indicators or trading methodologies. And then eventually you kind of figure out, you find your little bit of a zone that works for you, and you go from there. But there's a lot of books I would recommend. And so when it comes to trading and investing, there's different aspects of it, right? There's I guess I would say the technical part, maybe the skill part, if you want to call it that. And that's, the chart reading and understanding the technicals and understanding what the different indicators mean and how to interpret them and how to apply them in terms of a trading system. But then there's also the psychological part, and that is much harder. That is a very different animal there. That's a tougher game, and that takes a lot longer. You can't learn that just by reading a book or just by watching a video. You have to experience it for yourself. You got to make some of the mistakes for yourself and learn from them, and that's the key, right? You kind of keep getting back up and learning from those mistakes, because it's a long-term game, and over the long term, you'll start to mitigate some of those same mistakes, hopefully. And risk management is huge. Money management, right? Position sizing, using stops like today shows us. That's very important to preserving your account, because it's a long-term game. And if you stick around for the long term, eventually you'll become to get more consistent, and it'll be fun. It'll be a lot more fun. But I'm not going to lie, trading is a lot of work, guys, and it's a bit exhausting, to be honest with you. So it takes time. So don't it's like anything else, right? Don't expect to become a professional trader in a few weeks or even in a few months. I mean, it takes a really long time. You learned from Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah, I've read most of his books. I've read a lot of non-trading books that are related to investment and finance as well. It's just been an area of mine that I tend to have a passion for. And it helps because a lot of those books could be a little dry, to be honest with you. Let's see here. All right. I think that's going to be it. Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate you all joining. Smash that like button and ignore my video from earlier today. I posted it and the market went smack. So that one's probably not that good anymore. It was a short time frame, man. That shelf life on the video was like 15 minutes long. Oh man. All right, guys. Appreciate y'all joining me on this FUD and panic selling day in the crypto markets. We'll keep y'all posted. Until next time, take care, everyone.